Early autumn on a weekday night. I was 41 and working remotely in financial compliance, the kind of work that's mostly spreadsheets and quiet decisions. My partner was out of town for 3 nights, and the house, 2 stories, newer construction, predictable layout, felt like a tool I knew how to use. I finished a set of reports, loaded the dishwasher, and moved through the rooms, switching lights off behind me. The normal parts of the evening were the point. If you want more realistic accounts told like this, you can subscribe for the next one. At 10:47 p.m., I checked the front door deadbolt the way I always did, thumb on the turn until I felt its seat. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The hallway clock ticked with clean, even spacing. Alone didn't feel dramatic. It felt orderly. I stayed up later than usual because a quarterly audit was due at midnight, and I didn't want to submit it half-attended. I set my laptop on the dining table, where I could see the staircase without turning my head, mostly out of habit. My phone was face down, on silent, notifications off. I wanted the next hour to be simple: finish, attach, send, sleep. There was a faint draft that kept touching my ankles as I worked, cool against the hardwood. I assumed it was the upstairs bathroom window, the one that sometimes didn't latch cleanly. Before I sat down, I'd set the thermostat to 68 degrees Fahrenheit and watched the display blink as it accepted the change. It was mild outside, and the house should have held steady. Around 11:20 p.m., I heard a soft, single thud from upstairs. Not a sharp impact, more like something set down without care. I stopped typing and held still, letting my hands hover above the keys. I counted in my head without meaning to. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing followed it. Older framing expands and contracts. Even newer houses have their sounds. I told myself it was settling, or a duct shifting when the system cycled. At 11:23 p.m., I submitted the audit, watched the progress bar complete, and went back to organizing the supporting files. The house returned to its baseline quiet, and I let myself believe that was the end of it. About 10 minutes later, another muted sound came from a different place, closer to the stairwell this time. I pushed my chair back and stood at the base of the stairs, listening. No footsteps, no dragging, no voices. The upstairs remained dark, except for one thing. The upstairs hallway light was on. I was certain I'd turned it off earlier. I climbed just enough steps to reach the switch and clicked it down. The light vanished. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed to, listening to the absence of anything else. If you enjoy slow burn, realistic horror, a like helps me know to keep telling it this way. Back at the table, the draft felt slightly stronger. I went upstairs and checked the bathroom window. It was locked. When I returned downstairs, I started noticing intermittent floor creaks overhead. Irregular, not rhythmic. 3 distinct compressions, each separated by roughly 20 seconds, as if weight shifted, paused, then shifted again. I stopped pretending not to hear it. I went back to the bottom step and waited deliberately, holding my breath until my chest tightened. The refrigerator's hum cut out as it cycled, and the house seemed to widen into a larger silence. A 4th creak occurred directly above the staircase landing. It wasn't a groan along a beam. It was localized, a specific board giving under pressure. My body reacted before my thoughts caught up. I stepped backward into the dining room instead of climbing. The staircase light switch was halfway up the wall to my right, within reach if I wanted it. I didn't touch it. If someone was upstairs, they were between me and every bedroom. That simple spatial fact settled in my mind like a weight. I didn't call out. Announcing myself felt like giving away information I didn't need to give. Instead, I kept my eyes on the dark rectangle of the stairwell and slid my hand into my pocket for my car key fob. With my thumb, I hit unlock once. Outside, the car's lights flashed faintly through the front windows, brief, pale illumination across the living room walls. Immediately after that flash, a heavier step crossed the upstairs landing. It wasn't the ambiguous complaint of wood. It was decisive, like someone adjusting position after realizing they'd been seen. I moved toward the front door without running, careful with my feet, keeping my gaze angled upward. The upstairs hallway light snapped on again. I hadn't gone near the switch. In that new light, a shadow shifted across the top wall near the ceiling, brief, distorted by the banister spindles, like a shape passing behind them. It wasn't clear enough to describe as a person. It was clear enough to be wrong. I opened the front door, stepped out, and closed it gently behind me. I locked it from outside, fingers steady on the key. In the driveway, I got into my car and pulled the door shut, not starting the engine yet. Through the upstairs window, the hallway light stayed on for several seconds and then went dark. No one came out. No doors opened. No glass broke. I called the police from the car and reported a possible unauthorized entry. Voice even, details precise. The patrol car arrived at 11:58 p.m. The officers cleared the house methodically. I walked behind them at a distance I thought was reasonable, letting their flashlights lead. They checked the locks, the basement door, the attic access. No visible forced entry. No one found. Windows were latched. The attic insulation looked undisturbed. The basement was secure. They suggested an animal in the walls, stress, the mind filling gaps when you're alone late at night. I nodded because it was easier than arguing with people who wanted an explanation that ended the conversation. But I kept thinking about the weight in those creaks, how it localized above the landing, how it moved after the car lights flashed. The officer noted no alarm triggered between 10 p.m. and midnight. I booked a hotel anyway and slept with the curtains open, watching the parking lot lights until my eyes finally closed. The next morning, I returned in daylight and tried to make the house feel normal again. The first thing I noticed was the thermostat reading 72 degrees Fahrenheit. I stood in front of it longer than made sense, waiting for my memory to adjust. I'd set it to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I remembered the blink of the display, the little confirmation that it had accepted my change. Upstairs, the hallway light bulb felt warm to the touch, not hot, but recently used. My partner insisted she hadn't adjusted anything remotely through the app. When I opened the thermostat history, it showed a manual override at 11:31 p.m. Not a schedule change, not an automation. A manual input. I walked from the thermostat to the staircase and looked up at the landing as if the angle of the walls might explain it. It didn't. I still live in the house, and nothing like that has happened since. I checked the deadbolt earlier now, 10:30 p.m., and I don't do it casually. It's a deliberate motion, a habit I don't let myself rush. Some nights, when the house shifts the way houses do, I pause at the base of the stairs longer than necessary, listening past the first sound for a second and a third. I don't go up immediately when I hear a creak. I wait until it settles again, softly, after midnight, and I watch the dark landing as if it might decide to hold its own light. Share this with someone who appreciates grounded horror, and subscribe if you want the next account in the same restrained, realistic tone. Late winter. I was 38 and working as a municipal insurance assessor, temporarily based out of a rented townhouse while waiting for my home purchase to close. The place was narrow and efficient, garage below, living space in the middle, bedrooms on the top floor. My evenings were structured. Review paperwork, cook something simple, wash the pan, lights out by 10:30. I appreciated the anonymity of it. No history, no neighbors who knew me. At 9:12 p.m., I closed the garage door and watched it seal against the concrete. The baseboard heaters clicked softly as they cycled on, a dry, repetitive sound that made the space feel contained. If you prefer realistic horror accounts told plainly, you can subscribe for the next one. My partner was traveling for work, and I was alone for 4 nights. That evening I stood at the kitchen counter reviewing claim photos on my laptop, facing the sliding glass door that led to the small patio. The door was locked. The blinds were half open, angled just enough to let the yard lights through. At 10:18 p.m., the kitchen clock above the stove marked the time as I leaned closer to inspect water damage in a photograph. I noticed faint movement reflected in the glass. It passed quickly across the surface. I assumed it was headlights from the street beyond the complex. The glass radiated a thin layer of cold that I could feel on my hands as I rested them near the counter's edge. A little later, I heard a light interior door click upstairs. Not a slam, just the soft engagement of a latch. I paused, listening for the shift of airflow that sometimes followed when the heater changed pressure. The hollow sound of air moved through the vents, consistent, impersonal. The upstairs guest room door was typically kept shut. I pictured it in my mind, closed the way I'd left it that morning. I decided it was nothing more than the heater pulling against the frame. I didn't go up to check. The townhouse had ordinary sounds. I told myself that was all this was. About 10 minutes later, another click came from above. This one was slower, heavier, as if the latch met resistance before settling. I closed my laptop and went upstairs without urgency. The guest room door stood open a few inches. I was certain I had left it fully closed. I pushed it shut, pressing until I felt the latch catch firmly. I checked the window locked. The room was undisturbed, spare mattress, empty closet, no personal items yet unpacked. Back downstairs, I noticed the patio blinds were now fully closed. I didn't remember touching them. I stood still, replaying the evening in sequence. It was possible I'd adjusted them absent-mindedly. The blind cord hung unevenly on one side, slightly longer than the other. The house felt unchanged, but the acoustics seemed muted, as if fabric were absorbing more sound than it should. If you appreciate slow-burn, realistic horror, a like lets me know. At 10:46 p.m., I brushed my teeth in the upstairs bathroom. The exhaust fan buzzed steadily, filling the hallway with a low mechanical hum. In the mirror, I could see past my shoulder into the dim hallway beyond. The guest room door was open again. I hadn't heard it move. I hadn't felt a change in air pressure. I turned off the faucet and stood there, toothbrush in hand, studying the reflection rather than the door itself. The realization didn't come sharply. It settled in layers. I had been assigning explanations without evidence, heater, pressure, distraction, because explanations were easier than alternatives. I left the bathroom light on and stepped into the hall. I switched off the exhaust fan. The silence that followed was immediate and complete. Standing in the dark hallway, I let my eyes adjust. The guest room doorway was a darker rectangle inside the dimness. Then I heard it, a subtle floorboard compression from inside the room. Not a random creak traveling along a beam, but a localized depression, weight applied, held for a second, then released. The sound was precise enough that I could place it a few feet beyond the threshold. I didn't move toward it. My body stepped backward instead, slowly, careful not to create noise. From the stair landing, I looked again. There was something inside the room that interrupted the faint ambient light, an absence where light should have reflected. It suggested a human outline without defining it. I couldn't describe clothing, height, or movement. Just a density that didn't belong. The drywall near the doorway emitted a soft expanding scrape as the heater cycled. I used that sound to cover my retreat down the stairs. I didn't turn on additional lights. In the garage, I closed the interior door, locked it, and exited through the side door into the driveway. From there, I called the police. My voice remained steady as I described the sequence. When officers arrived and cleared the house, they found the guest room window unlocked from the inside. The latch was positioned horizontally. No one was inside. No forced entry anywhere. The officers suggested someone might have accessed the property before I moved in, perhaps hidden and later left when they realized I was home. It was a theory delivered in a tone meant to reassure. There were no footprints in the thin layer of snow outside the guest room window. The snow beneath it was smooth and undisturbed. I slept at a hotel that night, replaying the weight of that floorboard in my head. In the morning, cold dawn light flattened the depth of the townhouse, exposing corners that had seemed ambiguous in the dark. Nothing appeared disturbed. Furniture aligned. Surfaces clean. The guest room looked ordinary. Days later, I tested the blind cords at the patio door. One side did not reach evenly, as if tension had shifted. The guest room door never seemed to stay fully latched anymore. It required more pressure than before. The latch plate appeared slightly misaligned, though I couldn't remember if it had always been that way. I walked across the guest room floor repeatedly, trying to reproduce the exact compression sound I'd heard. I couldn't isolate it. Silence settled heavily whenever I stood in the doorway, as if the room held its breath in response to mine. I replayed the outline I'd seen, questioning whether it had been shadow, angle, or something more deliberate. I moved out sooner than planned. I told myself it was convenience, proximity to work, timing. But I still closed doors carefully at night, pressing until I feel the latch engage. I no longer assume sounds have explanations simply because explanations are available. I avoid standing in dark hallways facing open rooms. When a door clicks shut behind me now, I listen to the exact shape of that sound before I move again. Share this with someone who values grounded horror, and subscribe if you want the next account told just as plainly. Early summer, I was 45 and newly transitioned into full remote consulting. My days were structured but flexible, and my evenings had become predictable in a way I appreciated. We lived in a ranch-style home at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind where traffic slowed naturally. My spouse was visiting family out of state for the week, so the house felt temporarily simplified, fewer variables, fewer sounds. I ate dinner, read for a while in the living room, and adjusted the thermostat before settling in. At 9:58 p.m., I armed the security system in stay mode. The ceiling fan rotated steadily overhead, its rhythm steady enough to measure time against. If you prefer realistic horror accounts told without exaggeration, you can subscribe for the next one. I stayed up later than usual reviewing contracts that needed revision by morning. All the windows were closed because of the humidity, and the dog was boarded, so the house was completely empty except for me. At 10:30 p.m., while seated at the dining table with my laptop open, I heard a cough from the hallway. It wasn't loud. It was brief, suppressed, like someone trying not to draw attention. The air conditioner compressor kicked on at almost the same moment, and for a second I wondered if I'd misinterpreted mechanical noise. The hallway motion sensor light did not activate. Everything remained visually unchanged. The cough had been distinctly human. I replayed it in my head, isolating its cadence. I stood, checked the alarm panel, still green, no breach, no triggered zones. I walked the hallway slowly, listening for movement or displaced air. The narrow space carried a muted echo of my own footsteps, nothing more. All the bedroom doors were closed, exactly as I'd left them. I paused at each one, waiting for any secondary sound. Nothing followed. I told myself sound could travel unpredictably at night, especially in summer when outside air shifted. I returned to the table, unsettled but not alarmed. 15 minutes later, I heard a faint shifting sound from the direction of the master bedroom. Not a thud, more like fabric brushing against wood. I walked there with the lights on, telling myself clarity removes doubt. The master closet door was slightly ajar. I was certain I had shut it earlier. I slid it open and looked inside. Nothing was visibly disturbed. Shoes aligned, storage boxes stacked, hanging shirts evenly spaced. I closed it firmly and stood there longer than necessary. As I moved back toward the living room, I began leaving lights on behind me. Near the closet area, the air felt cooler than the rest of the room, pooling near the floorboards. The AC vent was several feet away, not positioned to create that pocket. The silence in the house deepened. I found myself listening more than moving, aware of how little ambient noise there actually was. If you appreciate slow-burn, realistic horror, a like lets me know. I remained in the bedroom, watching the closed closet door as if observation alone could resolve it. Then I heard it, a slow inhale from inside the closet. Not mechanical, not airflow cycling through ducts. It was controlled and measured, ending in a faint pause. My own breathing suddenly sounded too loud in comparison. The bedside lamp cast narrow shadow lines across the closet panels, breaking the door into thin vertical segments. I stepped backward without meaning to. The realization came without drama. Someone could be inside, waiting for proximity. I did not test the handle again. Instead of approaching, I exited the bedroom calmly and walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. I picked up my car keys from the counter, careful not to rush. As I crossed the living room, I heard the closet door slide open behind me. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the metallic roll of wheels along a track, controlled, not hurried. I resisted the impulse to turn around. The security panel by the front door remained green, no alerts, no motion detected. That detail lodged in my mind, even as my body moved. I unlocked the front door, stepped outside, and locked it from the exterior. The night air was thick and still. From the driveway, I could see the interior lights glowing through the windows. I stood there, counting my breaths, trying to detect movement through the blinds. After several minutes, the master bedroom light switched off. I had left it on. The house darkened incrementally, as if someone inside were conserving energy. I called the police from the driveway. They arrived at 11:42 p.m., entered cautiously, and cleared every room. The closet was empty. The window locks were intact. No forced entry anywhere. In the sliding track of the closet door, dust was disturbed in a narrow, uneven line. The officers suggested HVAC noise or structural movement. They walked me through airflow patterns and pressure shifts, speaking in practical tones. There were no signs of entry, no missing items, no damaged locks. I stayed with a neighbor that night. In daylight the next morning, I returned and inspected the closet carefully. Sunlight reached into every corner, exposing surfaces clearly. On the closet floor near the back wall, I noticed a shallow indentation in the carpet. It wasn't shaped like a box or shoe. It was simply compressed, as if weight had rested there briefly. Nothing else appeared altered. Over the next few days, I compared that indentation to the base of storage bins and shoes. It didn't match any of them. The alarm logs showed no interior motion recorded during the entire period. The temperature difference near the closet continued intermittently, a subtle coolness that gathered near the floor. I removed everything from the closet and vacuumed thoroughly, studying the track and frame. One ceiling vent above the closet was partially loosened, though not enough to explain airflow of that shape. The air inside the closet carried a faint stale quality that lingered longer than the rest of the room. I avoided standing fully inside it. I still live in the house. Nothing has repeated. I keep the closet doors open now, refusing to let them seal fully. I never investigate breathing sounds, even when I convince myself they're mechanical. Some spaces feel occupied, even when proven empty. At night, the closet door rests permanently ajar, and the security system still shows no alerts from that evening. If this account resonated with you, share it with someone who appreciates grounded horror, and subscribe for the next one told just as plainly.